Loom's co-founder sold his company to Atlassian for $975 million. Imagine building a billion-dollar company by the time you're 32. You've got fame, fortune, everything the world says you should want. But instead, you feel a deep emptiness. And you're left asking one haunting question. What's the point? A question so consuming that you throw away an extra $60 million in pay, contemplate suicide, and even sever your closest relationships. This is the story of Vinay Hiremath, the co-founder of Loom, a tech unicorn that revolutionized how we communicate at work. But behind the polished success story lies a truth so raw, so uncomfortable, it's rarely talked about in Silicon Valley. What happens when the very dream you've spent your life chasing leaves you feeling empty and lost? Today, we dive into Vinay's shocking revelation, the brutal lesson he learned at the peak of his success, and why his story might just help you avoid the biggest mistake of your life. Born in 1991, Vinay Hiremath dropped out of the University of Illinois at Urbana-Champaign after just 2 years. He moved from a small college town in Illinois to Palo Alto, California to pursue his passion for startups. After a couple of startups, he took his learnings and co-founded Loom in the early 2010s. Loom is a video sharing platform that enabled users to create and share short-form videos. In its early days, Loom was just 2 weeks away from running out of money. Vinay maxed out his credit cards to keep the company afloat. He helped raise $200 million in funding and scale the team to 250 employees. It worked.
Hey, Greg, you are our first customer. Yay! Bloom team just wanted to thank you here. So appreciate you being with us and appreciate the sign up. And Luna does too, apparently.
Just giving you a big hug.
Hope you're having a sunny day in Australia. Peace, Greg.
See ya.
The founders brought Loom back from the dead. In 2018, Vinay was named in the Forbes 30 Under 30 list, and the company eventually grew to over 25 million users worldwide. Loom was eventually acquired by Atlassian for $975 million in 2023.
The more you scale and the more you go on this journey, like there are extreme highs with being a founder when things are going well, but like they certainly come with extreme lows.
Before I go further, I want to be clear that I don't know Vinay personally, and I've researched everything from public sources. Though I may not agree with everything they do, I am grateful to people like Vinay for putting their raw, unfiltered personal information out there for us to learn from. Brittany Peach is another example, so check out those videos I made of her story if you're interested. And it's just me here doing the work, so if I got anything wrong, please comment and let me know. Also, if you get value from this video and would like to support my work, please hit the like and subscribe button to help this content reach more like-minded people. I'm rich and I have no idea what to do with my life. That's how Loom co-founder Vinay Hiremath begins his brutally honest confession. After selling his company, he's now in a place most of us would dream about. Financial freedom so vast that he never has to work again. But here's the twist. Instead of feeling liberated, he feels lost. He describes his life as a haze, every day feeling like a meaningless side quest. The usual drivers, money, status, ambition, no longer hold any power over him. With infinite freedom comes a crushing realization. Freedom without direction can be its own prison. And the irony? Even writing about his situation feels like a hollow attempt to create purpose. Vinay admits he has no grand lesson to share, no neatly tied up narrative arc. He's just here, vulnerable and raw, pouring his unfiltered thoughts into the void of the internet. This isn't a story about bragging or asking for sympathy. It's about what happens when you achieve the dream and realize that it's become a nightmare. What would you do if staying at a job you hated meant pocketing $60 million? For most of us, the answer seems obvious, but for Vinay Hiremath, it wasn't that simple. He knew he couldn't stay at the acquiring company. The reasons were familiar: office politics, glacial decision making, coworkers who felt like NPCs. But walking away from 60 million, even after making more money than he could ever spend, the sheer magnitude of that number started playing tricks on his mind. So he made an unconventional decision. He went to the redwoods. Within 5 minutes of his first hike, the towering trees offered clarity he couldn't find in boardrooms or spreadsheets. Their silent whispers carried truths most of us ignore. What is the point of money if not for freedom? What is your most scarce resource if not time? That hike didn't give him all the answers, but it gave him conviction. He would leave the comfort of certainty. He would give up the ego-driven need to look like he had figured everything out. Why? Because after a decade of being consumed by work, he was determined to feel alive again, even if it meant stepping into the unknown. What's the first thing Vinay Hiremath did after leaving a decade-long grind? He went all in on robotics. In just 2 weeks, he met with over 70 investors and founders, convinced this was his next grand chapter. He had it all planned: giving computers arms and legs, solving the world's labor shortage, and staying competitive against China. With $1 trillion market for repetitive labor, it had to be his life's calling, right? Wrong. By the end of those 2 weeks, Vinay felt utterly deflated. He didn't want to start a robotics company. He wasn't even passionate about it. What he really wanted was to look like Elon Musk, and he knew it. He calls it cringe now, but at the time, it felt real. He'd spun a narrative so convincing that even he believed it. Yet deep down, the truth was clear. This wasn't about purpose. It was about ego. Sometimes the hardest thing to admit is when you're chasing someone else's dream. After walking away from robotics, Vinay Hiremath was adrift. No purpose, no direction. He traveled to stunning places with his loving and supportive girlfriend of nearly 2 years. But instead of finding clarity, he found conflict. The arguments started small but became regular. He knew it wasn't her, it was him. Years of buried insecurities, masked by success and ambition, were finally surfacing, and no amount of love from someone else could fill that void. So he made a heartbreaking decision to end the relationship. It wasn't because he didn't care, but because he needed to face himself fully, without distractions and without a safety net. Looking back, Vinay realized how deeply his sense of self had been tied to Loom. In the early days, when the company was scrappy and the future uncertain, he actually felt secure. He had nothing to lose. Gratitude for the journey kept him grounded. But as Loom soared to unimaginable heights, so did the expectations, both from others and from himself. When the company hit its first major hurdle, a round of layoffs, it shattered the identity he had built around it.
We ended up going through layoffs. You need to take ultimate responsibility for everything in your life. And so you start to wonder, like, where are the areas where I didn't take responsibility that led us to here? And I think that was a really dark moment for me and my co-founder. And we've made it through it. It still doesn't make things right. Like, there are a lot of people who ended up having to find new work, like ended up having to leave Loom. Like, it really sucked. But, that was certainly a low point in a different way than I wouldn't have expected. And it's like no coincidence that I am prioritizing mental and physical health over everything else, because I consider it a major contributing factor to where we had gotten.
The insecurities he had tethered to the company's success began unraveling into a complex web of self doubt that he's only now beginning to untangle. What do you do when the identity you've worked insanely hard to build is no longer enough to hold you together? When Vinay Hiremath broke up with his girlfriend, he didn't wallow in self reflection. Not at first. Instead, he made a bold, borderline reckless decision to climb a 6,800-meter peak in the Himalayas. No mountaineering experience, no training, just raw emotion and the need to externalize it by pushing his body and mind to their absolute limits.
Here we are. The old tower.
At the start, it felt like the perfect idea. But as altitude sickness, freezing cold, and chronic bronchitis set in, and as every seasoned climber he met questioned his sanity, reality started to sink in. There were terrifying moments. At one point, he got so hypoxic that he was rappelling down cliffs while practically hallucinating. Yet somehow, he made it. He completed both summits, and in doing so, he reconnected with something buried deep inside. Doing hard things is the heartbeat of my life. Vinay doesn't fully understand why he needs to chase these impossible challenges. Perhaps it's rooted in his difficult childhood. But the mountains reminded him that the struggle, the discomfort, and the climb itself are what keep him alive. Back home, when recounting his Himalayan adventure, a friend jokingly suggested he join Elon Musk and Vivek at Doge to help save America from defaulting on its debt. One thing led to another. 8 calls later, with people who talked fast, exuded brilliance, and were relentlessly focused, Vinay was in. Signal groups, projects, the works. It took 2 minutes for Vinay Hiremath to get the offer to join Doge. No long deliberations, no drawn-out interviews. A simple yes, followed by cool, and he was in. Within minutes, he was added to multiple signal groups, driving headfirst into the high-stakes meetings with software, HR, and legal teams. And this was the day before Thanksgiving. What followed was a whirlwind. Over the next 4 weeks, Vinay found himself on hundreds of calls, recruiting some of the smartest people he'd ever spoken to, working on confidential projects, and getting an up-close look at the dysfunction of government systems. It was intense. It was chaotic. It was exhilarating. For the first time in a long time, he experienced the power of urgency, real urgency, the kind where every moment feels critical and every task carries undeniable purpose. Compared to this, his robotics phase felt laughable, like a half-hearted attempt to create meaning. But amidst the buzz of high-pressure missions and brilliant minds, Vinay realized something even more important. Doge wasn't the solution he needed. The mission was inspiring, but it wasn't his mission. Fixing the government wouldn't fix him. So, after 4 intoxicating weeks, he made a decision. He walked away. No move to DC, no grand government saving journey. Instead, he booked a one-way ticket to Hawaii, choosing uncertainty over urgency and committing to the one thing he'd been avoiding: facing himself. So here's where Vinay Hiremath's journey has led him. Hawaii. Not chasing status, not building the next billion-dollar company, just learning physics. Why physics? The reason he tells himself sounds ambitious enough. to strengthen his first principles thinking and just maybe start a company that manufactures real world things. But the truth, he's learning because it makes him happy. That's it. No grand plan, no pressure to make it worthwhile. For the first time, the goal isn't the next big thing. It's simply to be raw, real, and present with himself. And he's okay with that. If this never leads to anything spectacular, so be it. If he never does something as big as Loom again, that's fine too. What matters now is applying humility to every thought, every action, because it's the only thing that feels authentic. But even in this simplicity, the questions linger. Why did it take pushing himself to the absolute limit to finally reach this point? Why couldn't he leave Loom and just admit, I don't know what's next? Why does his journey always have to feel grand to feel valid? What's so wrong with being insignificant? And why does letting people down feel so unbearable? Vinay doesn't have the answers yet, but for the first time, he's not pretending to. He's not spinning a narrative or manufacturing purpose. Instead, he's letting the questions hang in the air, uncomfortably, waiting to see what unfolds.
I look for founders who are honestly willing to work all the time. I'm not looking for lifestyle founders.
At one point, Vinay thought he had figured it out, his values, his mission, his goals. He wrote them down, broke them apart, and built a logic system around them. On paper, it all looked perfect. But here's the truth: his why wasn't his own, it was borrowed, shaped by what others expected, by what the world celebrates, and by the illusion of success. I've seen this time and time again, not just in myself, but in countless senior leaders and executives. Let me know in the comments if you want to hear my story someday. But here's the thing: almost no one talks about their deepest insecurities. Social media, it only makes this worse. It glorifies the highlights, feeds the idea that more is always better, and makes it far too easy to confuse validation with meaning and applause with fulfillment. Maybe Vinay had the right idea about finding meaning by doing hard things, but he fooled himself into thinking the hardest challenges were out there: building companies, scaling mountains, facing external challenges. Maybe the hardest challenge isn't out there at all. Maybe it's looking inward and facing yourself. Let me know in the comments if you'd like me to make a video on this difficult topic. But before you climb your next mountain, ask yourself, are these my values or someone else's? Am I chasing this goal for me or for the world to applaud? Because the scariest thing isn't failing. It's waking up one day and realizing you spent your life climbing someone else's mountain. Hey, you're still here? That's the end of the video, so do you really want to just hang out with me and stare at a blank screen? I mean, that's really it. It took a long time for me to make that video. As I said, it's just me. So, I mean, I guess I could just talk about stuff unscripted since, yeah, that was about it for the video. I mean, do you think I'm just gonna provide some deep, dark secrets, my deepest insecurities, now that you've waited for so long? Well, I mean, I may do that, but I think I might need to make another video on on my story if that's what you're looking for. But I've got to give folks like Vinay credit because they're trying their best to be authentic and putting it all out there for us. So hopefully you found that video interesting and thought provoking and inspiring, maybe, or even just informative. Yeah, I was going to put more content on the looking inside piece. There's a lot of stuff out there. It's a complex question. There's stuff on finding your why. So comment if you're still here and want to see it in a future video. I mean, but if you're still here, I gotta think you've got better things to do. I mean, really, than just waiting here, listening to someone just kind of talking into the void, and you're just staring at a blank screen. Yeah, I mean, you really must have other things you should be doing, right? All right. Well, if you're wondering if it's me that's made all of the videos on my channel, the answer is yes, it's me. Wondering why my voice is different on some of the other videos? Well, because I changed my voice for some of the earlier ones because I wasn't sure if I wanted to put my real voice in the video, and then eventually I decided to. So this is my real voice. So yeah, I mean, it's kind of hard to have a conversation when I'm the only one that's talking, but yeah, I mean, you could add some comments if you feel that you want to communicate something to me. I'm always open to hearing about it. Won't be as real time as a conversation, but it works. All right, well, I really have to go now, but thanks for listening all the way to the end, and catch you on the next one. And remember, stay savvy.